Hello there, everyone, and welcome. Today I'll be talking about spirit versus matter, and I'll be talking about the differences and resemblance between the two because I've seen a lot of people wonder, how can you prove the spiritual world and its veracity, and how can we prove that it's actually existing, that our experiences aren't just in a vacuum, right? And yeah, so that's what we'll be tackling today. And if you're new here, I am Mary Iris Jane. I am a tarot reader, tarot teacher, and an artist, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. So I'll dive right into the subject for today with definitions of both spirit versus matter. And so if we think of the material world we live in, or the physical world we live in right now, it is something that we can touch, that we can see, that we can feel, that we can smell, right? With all of our senses, it's something that we can easily prove and measure with different tools, right? It is something that is very concrete. It is something that is gonna grow and change according to our linear timeline that we live in, right? The linear time space reality we're in. So anything that is in the material world is gonna be moving according to certain laws, right? Laws of physics and science, which I'm not gonna get into today. But yeah, materiality is really something concrete. It's something that's dense, and that's why we can prove it and that we can see it with so much ease, right? It is the dimension of reality that we're most attuned to. And so if we think of spirit, spirit is something that's movable like the wind, right? It is something that can shift and can change, and it is multidimensional, right? It is not bound to the laws of physicality or of matter. So spirit is always gonna be able to shift, always gonna be able to expand beyond the limits of this physical world, right? And so if we think of spirit, it really is the essence, the energy, the life force energy behind the material world we live in. Another way to see spirit is to see it as a consciousness that pervades everything from our bodies to animals to the trees outside to even, your objects around you, right? Your tables, chairs, couches, lamps, even this device you're watching this on, right? So everything has consciousness, everything has energy that animates the physical realm, right? Another thing to consider when we compare the two is actually the symbol for the earth and astrology. And so, if you've ever seen the symbol of the earth, sometimes astrologers don't include it in their chart analysis, but it's basically a circle, and within this circle is a cross. And so, if you think of this cross, it represents the four elements, it represents the incarnation within the physical world, right? And so these four elements are of the air, of the fire, the water, and the earth. And so those are four elements that shape everything around us, from our bodies to the natural world and natural resources, and it shapes our consciousness really. And within this symbol, there is a circle, and the circle represents the spirit. So it represents all of who we are beyond this physical world, right? And so if we go to look at this sign of the earth, it is this cross within the circle. So it means that there's this spirit that is encompassing this cross. There is the spirit that is encompassing these four different elements. And so, if we think about it, really, spirit is a fifth element that is kind of imbuing each one of the four elements. And this is something that, if you study tarot, you can also apply to the four suits and to the major arcana. It is often said the major arcana is that fifth element of spirit, right? That fifth suit. And the other suits represents the four more material elements of our experience here. So something really interesting about different faiths and different belief systems around our incarnation and around, you know, what it means to be alive, what it means to be dead, what happens when we die, is that some people really believe, you know, that our earthly realm is all that exists, right? When we die, we go back to the earth, we get composted, we go back to the soil, to dust. Once our body decays, our consciousness dies with it in a way. But some other people, on top of, you know, of course, we all know that when we die, our bodies can compose themselves, you know, if we are buried in the earth, for example, which doesn't happen a lot these days. But if you were to be buried in the earth, you know, after a while, there wouldn't be a body anymore. And so does our consciousness go back to the earth and does it compose itself? Some people believe that, you know, we have souls and that we incarnate here on earth in our body, and that once our, you know, our body gets composed, that it dies, that the soul prevails and that it will rise out of the body and go back to the spirit world in a way. And so for some people, that is what they believe, and that is what I believe personally. But something that is interesting in both of those belief systems around death is that when we die, we go back to a chaotic state. We go back to a state that is not linear, that is not fixed, right? So the material world is very fixed, it's very defined in its nature, right? If you're a tree, you have the experience of a tree. If you're a bird, you can fly. If you're a pig, you know, you're gonna be down to the earth. If you're a fish, you're gonna be in water. So the form that we take on in the physical world is very fixed, and our experience and the learnings we do are going to be dependent upon that form, right? But once we die, we let go of that fixed, defined state, and we go back to a chaotic, primordial state of being. So going back to spirit and trying to prove its existence, I was doing some research for this video and I thought it was really interesting, you know, because as humans, we are limited. You know, what we see, what we experience, and how we experience the world is limited to our senses and to our abilities and to our tools, right? And so everything that we get out of those tools and out of those senses will be limited to those objects, to those senses, right? So a fact that's really interesting is that we actually can only see 1% of the light spectrum, right? And so only 1% of that light spectrum we can see with our human eyes, right? And so we can't see gamma rays, we can't see UV light, we can't see cosmic rays. And so those are all types of light that do exist but that we can't see with our visible eyes, right? And there's also microwave rays, and so there's all different types of rays, and I'm gonna put the image here so you can see. And so I think that image is really interesting because it demonstrates like, hey, we can't actually see everything that's going on in our world, right? And another really interesting thing is called Kirlian photography. And so Kirlian photography is a process that enables us to capture our electromagnetic field and to see its colors and its shape. And when we think about the spirit, we can think about also our aura, right? And how our energetic field is actually bigger than our body. And even if you can't see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And with the tool of Kirlian photography, you can see those colors and you can see the charge of that field. And so while we don't have all of the tools to truly understand the spiritual world, and that maybe we can sense it with our current senses right now, or maybe we're not attuned to it, right? But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist just because you can't prove that with our current tools and sets of logics and our scientific current understanding and way of testing. And so I'm not doing this video to convert anyone to spirituality, but it's just to remind you, if you are having spiritual experiences that you are doubting maybe yourself, or the guidance that's coming through for you, or maybe you are doubting just the very existence of this world, I want to remind you that we currently don't have all of the tools to truly understand at the spiritual realm right now, and that it's okay to rely on your own personal experience as long as you're doing it with respect and with discernment and with heart. I think that continuing to explore spirituality and continuing to connect to what is beyond the material world will really help you to open up to new ways of seeing the world. It will open you up to new feelings, to new experiences that are really incredible and that can really help infuse this physical, concrete world with so much beauty, right? And something else I want to add is the spiritual world, the world of spirits, or, maybe you call them ghosts, the world of entities and of consciousness and source that is beyond us. It has nothing to prove to us, right? And if we stay rigid and we stay caged within our material rules and limitations and stuffy belief systems, then, if we don't open up to a new way of sensing the world, it's not gonna appear to us. If we are not open of heart, it's often gonna be much more difficult to prove the existence of this world, because we won't even be able to connect with it in the first place, right? And I have a little metaphor for that, if it can help you understand what I'm saying right now, is, for example, in romantic relationships, right? When we explore the concept of love is something that's more conceptual in nature, and right, it can also translate into physical actions, but at the end of the day, it's an energy that can be felt, right? And it's not necessarily just about the actions that someone take, it's also about that energy behind them, right? And so imagine that you're someone that didn't believe in love, right? And you were with a partner and you were always asking them to prove themselves to you, to prove their love to you, right? Maybe they do something and you don't really believe in the love that they gave you, or you didn't feel it. It doesn't mean that it's not there. And so that is an example of how, by trying to get something out of this love, getting something out of this energy because you don't believe in it, you're actually making that relationship to that energy very narrow and very limited, right? And so this is the same with your relationship to spirit. If you ask spirit to prove itself to you, it's not gonna be very interested, to be honest, to prove itself to you. It has no time to waste. It's multidimensional. Why would they want to waste their time to try to prove themselves and this uh, material world, right? By staying open to new experiences, we can really start to experience beautiful things. And if you've had a mystical experience, if you've had spontaneous healings, if you've had experience and dreams where you met your ancestors, maybe, or you maybe talked to dead relatives, or maybe you've had just crazy synchronicities, then you know that the spiritual world is true and you don't need to prove it, right? And so, why ask of the spiritual world to prove itself to us when, it's just a different reality, it's a different way of being, and it doesn't mean that the spiritual world should clash with the material world. I think there is space for both in our experience, and that we need to be inclusive of both to live a whole life. So that is it for today's video. Today I would love to know in the comments below, what is one experience that you've had that really planted a deep inner knowing in you that the spiritual world is real, right? Maybe it's not something that you can prove with scientific tools, but it's an experience that deeply moved you. I would love to know. I invite you to like this video, share it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this from me. I also invite you to check out the links and the description box for my services, and also I have a newsletter where you can access some freebies to understand more about your archetypes with tarot, and there's also a link to 5 tips from an artist to read tarot. And so I would love to receive any questions you have about tarot, as well as I'm preparing more material to share with you around this topic. So thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to connect, and I hope you have a beautiful end of your day. Bye.